The first-class cabin on this flight from London to New York felt like a world apart, a sanctuary of quiet luxury suspended in the sky. Soft golden lights bathed the cabin in a gentle glow that accentuated the elegance of every detail. Plush leather seats, wide and inviting, lined the space like thrones in a palace above the clouds. The polished wooden tables gleamed under the warm light, and the crystal glasses reflected it like tiny works of art. The steady hum of the engines provided a peaceful soundtrack, a subtle reminder that this place of privilege floated high above. The earth the passengers here were no strangers to wealth. They were the kind of people who no longer noticed the luxury surrounding them. Business moguls, heirs, influential figures used to having the best. A silver-haired man in a perfectly tailored Italian suit, shoes so polished they mirrored the cabin lights, flipped through a financial journal. A woman in a beige Chanel dress, a string of large pearls resting elegantly at her neck, sipped champagne with slow, precise movements, her eyes scanning the cabin with quiet confidence. Among them sat Evelyn Monroe. She was in her mid-50s, a well-known figure in New York's fashion industry, someone who had built an empire with taste and determination. Her hair was styled in soft waves, pinned back in a classic updo. Her face was carefully made up, her lips painted a striking red, hidden partially behind oversized sunglasses. A brand new Hermes bag rested on her lap, the scent of fine leather, still fresh. She sat with perfect posture, glancing around with the air of someone who believed that first class was made for people like her. Then, the cabin door opened and a man stepped inside. His movements were calm, unhurried, and unassuming. He wore a simple gray t-shirt, dark jeans with worn hems, and old sneakers scuffed at the toes. A soft black fabric backpack, faded with time but clean and well kept, hung from one shoulder. His face was tanned, his brown eyes warm, his features familiar but softened by the lack of fanfare. It was David Beckham. But tonight, there was no spotlight, no designer suit, no entourage, no flash of cameras. Just a man in plain clothes, moving through the world quietly. And so, in this polished, perfect space, no one recognized him. Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly as she took him in. She glanced at him from head to toe, and in that brief look, irritation flickered across her face. First class? Dressed like that? What is the world coming to? Probably some nouveau rich showing off their money, trying to pretend they belong. Beckham walked to his seat, 2B, right next to Evelyn. As he reached the seat, he offered her a polite nod and a soft smile while lifting his bag into the overhead compartment. Evelyn said nothing. She turned her head toward the window, her lips pressed tight, a subtle smirk curving one corner of her mouth. Beckham sat down, fastened his seatbelt, and leaned back, glancing quietly around the cabin. His eyes were calm, but beneath that calm was a familiar sadness, the sadness of someone who had, too often, been judged by what he wore rather than who he was. A flight attendant approached with a warm, professional smile. "Good evening. May I offer you something to drink?" Without looking at the attendant, Evelyn replied smoothly, "Your best Italian red, please. And a smoked salmon." The attendant nodded, turning to Beckham. "And for you, sir?" Beckham smiled gently. "Just a bottle of water, please, and a chicken sandwich, if you have one." "Thank you." Evelyn raised her eyebrows, a small, condescending smile playing at her lips. She lowered her voice just enough for Beckham to hear, but with the clear intention that he should. "A sandwich? In first class? How fitting." Beckham didn't flinch. He kept his smile, gazing out the window as the night deepened outside. When the meals arrived, Beckham unfastened his belt and reached for a book inside his backpack. In doing so, his arm brushed against the tray and the sandwich slid off, falling to the floor and splitting apart. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Beckham said quickly, leaning down to pick it up, his face marked with genuine regret. The attendant stepped in at once. "That's no problem at all, sir. Let me get you a fresh one." Beckham shook his head gently. "Please don't trouble yourself. It was my mistake." Evelyn shook her head slowly, her voice cool, dripping with disdain. "Exactly. As I thought, you can always tell someone's class by how they handle themselves. First class has certainly lost its standards. Beckham lifted his gaze to her, his eyes steady and kind. I'm sorry if my presence here is bothering you. Evelyn let out a dry, humorless laugh. Bothering me? I just don't understand why the airline would sell first-class tickets to people like this. You'd be far more comfortable in the back of the plane, near the lavatories. The words hung heavy in the space. Several nearby passengers turned their heads, disapproval clear in their eyes. One man sighed, shaking his head quietly. Beckham adjusted his seatbelt, his voice soft but firm. I hope you have a pleasant flight, ma'am. The head flight attendant stepped in, speaking gently, trying to ease the tension. Ma'am, please. All of our first-class guests deserve the same level of service and respect. Evelyn crossed her arms, turning back to the window, but couldn't resist muttering under her breath. First class just isn't what it used to be. Beckham turned to the window as well, his gaze resting on the runway lights, blurred by the mist outside. A quiet sadness filled him. Sadness that even here, in this place meant for the best of what people could offer, smallness of heart still found a way in. The engines hummed louder. The plane began to move, lifting into the night sky, carrying not just its passengers, but a story that, before the flight was done, would change someone's understanding of what it truly meant to belong. The steady hum of the engines filled the first-class cabin like a low, calming symphony. The soft golden lights cast a warm, intimate glow over the polished wood tables, crystal glasses, and fine leather seats. Everything looked perfect, a world of quiet wealth and privilege, where appearances were everything and nothing seemed out of place. Evelyn sat upright, arms folded across her chest, her gaze fixed on the night sky beyond the window. Outside, the dark expanse stretched endlessly, broken only by the faint twinkle of distant city lights far below. In her mind, she reassured herself that she had done the right thing, spoken out for the dignity of first class, put that man in his place. There was a flicker of satisfaction deep within her, the kind that comes from believing you've protected what's proper. Beside her, David sat in silence. He had put on his headphones and closed his eyes, but sleep would not come. The words she had thrown at him, the looks of disdain, they weren't new to him. But no matter how many times he had faced such moments, they still stung, because they reminded him of a time long ago, of the boy he had once been in London, arriving at the training grounds, hearing the whispers behind his back. That scrawny kid? He'll never make it. Waste of time. He remembered the sting of those words and the fire they sparked, and how, with every goal, every match, he had answered them in the only way that mattered, on the field. Just a few rows back, a young man in his 20s was leaning forward, peering toward David's seat. Since the moment David had entered the cabin, something about him had seemed familiar. The young man nudged his travel companion. Hey, look at the guy in 2B. Doesn't he look like David Beckham? His friend squinted. Are you kidding? Beckham? Dressed like that? In first class? But the young man wasn't convinced. I'm telling you, that's him. I've seen him up close at a match once. That's definitely him. Unable to contain his excitement, he pulled out his phone, ready to snap a discreet picture. But just then, David turned his head slightly. Their eyes met. And in that brief glance, the young man saw something, a quiet request, a simple plea. David's gaze was kind but firm, and with a small shake of his head, he asked without words, "Please don't." The sincerity in that look stopped the young man cold. His heart pounded with a mix of excitement and guilt. Slowly, he lowered his phone, nodding in silent understanding. I get it. I'm sorry, he whispered, though he knew David couldn't hear him. David offered a small, grateful smile before turning back to the window. A short while later, the flight attendants came through the cabin offering newspapers and magazines. Evelyn, still holding herself high, selected an international sports paper almost absent-mindedly, partly out of boredom, partly because it felt like the right thing for a first-class passenger to read. She flipped through it with little interest, skimming headlines and photos. But then her eyes stopped. A bold headline caught her attention. David Beckham, a global icon of humility on and off the field. Beneath it was a photograph of David at a charity event, dressed in a sharp suit, his familiar warm smile captured perfectly by the camera. Evelyn stared at the page, reading the words slowly now. David Beckham, England's football legend, one of the most influential athletes in history, celebrated not only for his talent but for his kindness, his charity, work across Europe, Africa, and the Americas. She murmured aloud without realizing it, Beckham! That name, it sounds so familiar, She kept reading, drawn in despite herself. The list of awards, achievements, and acts of generosity seemed endless. A man of talent, wealth, and heart. The kind of man she would normally admire without hesitation. Evelyn turned to the man across the aisle, her voice tinged with newfound awe as she showed him the article. Now, this is a true gentleman, Beckham, Talented, rich, and still humble. The kind of man you don't see often anymore. The man smiled politely, glancing toward David and wondering how she could still not see what was right beside her. Evelyn gazed again at the photograph in the paper, studying the familiar features. And then, as if drawn by some unseen force, she lifted her head. Her eyes drifted to the man seated next to her. And in that moment, time seemed to stop. The same face, the same kind eyes, the same quiet strength. It was him. Her breath caught in her throat, her face flushed hot, her heart racing. She glanced back at the paper, then at David, then at the paper again. The truth was undeniable. No. It can't be. I just insulted David Beckham, a man the world admires, a man I claimed to respect not 10 seconds ago. A flight attendant passed by, pausing briefly to address David with a respectful nod. It's an honor to have you with us today, Mr. Beckham. Evelyn heard it, each word like a quiet thunderclap in her ears. She lowered her head, her hands trembling slightly. Embarrassment, regret, and shame rose inside her, stronger than she had ever felt before. Suddenly, she felt as if every eye in the cabin was on her, judging her as she had judged him. The words she had spoken, the look she had given, they echoed in her mind now, each one sharper than the last. She placed the paper on the small table before her, her fingers tightening around its edge as if to steady herself. But no amount of grasping could hold back the realization that swept over her. I could have been proud to sit beside him. I could have spoken to him, learned from him. But instead, I let my arrogance blind me. I wasted the moment. She dared to steal a glance at David now. Gone was the irritation, the disdain. In its place was respect, admiration, and a deep, painful sense of remorse. David sat quietly, his gaze fixed on the endless night beyond the window. He seemed utterly at peace, unaffected by the storm that now raged within Evelyn's heart. His calm, his grace, his silent strength, they humbled her more than any rebuke ever could. The first-class cabin remained still, the hum of the engines the only sound. But within Evelyn, a transformation had begun, all because of the quiet dignity of the man beside her. The first-class cabin remained wrapped in a hushed stillness, broken only by the steady hum of the engines as the aircraft soared through the night sky. Evelyn sat frozen, her heart pounding, every fiber of her being weighed down by shame and regret. It felt as if even the soft golden lights above were casting a spotlight on the narrowness of her earlier thoughts, on every harsh word she had spoken. Beside her, David gazed quietly out the window. The moonlight filtering through the glass bathed his face in a calm, almost ethereal glow. His silence did not ease Evelyn's guilt. Instead, it deepened it, making her feel small, exposed. The look she had once imagined as admiring seemed now to judge her. The very words she had so confidently used against him echoed back at her, louder with each passing moment. Evelyn drew a deep, trembling breath. Inside, a battle raged between pride, which urged her to remain silent, and a newfound humility that begged her to make amends. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, she shifted in her seat, her hand trembling as it rested lightly on the shared armrest. Her voice, when it came, was soft, unsteady, but sincere. "Mr. Beckham, I need to say something." David turned to her, his eyes warm yet penetrating, as if seeing straight to the heart of the matter. "I'm listening, ma'am." Evelyn lowered her gaze, her voice thick with emotion. "I was wrong. I insulted you. I was arrogant, shallow, and I am truly sorry." She paused, swallowing hard, her eyes brimming with tears. "I thought I was better than you because of how you looked, but now I see the smallness wasn't yours, it was mine." David regarded her quietly for a moment, then offered a gentle smile, his voice kind. "You're not the first to make that mistake, and you won't be the last. What matters is that you see it now." Evelyn blinked rapidly, trying in vain to hold back her tears. But they came anyway, warm and silent, tracing down her cheeks. "Aren't you angry? I behaved so poorly." David shook his head slowly. "Anger only adds weight to the soul. I've learned that sometimes silence and kindness reflect more than any harsh word ever could." Evelyn let out a shaky breath, the weight in her chest easing just a little. "I thought I was accomplished, but now I see how poor I am in spirit." David's eyes softened with genuine compassion. "We're rich or poor not by what we own, but by how we treat others. And tonight, you've grown richer because you've been honest with yourself." The cabin remained quiet, the night pressing gently against the windows. Evelyn hesitated, then spoke again, her voice smaller now. "Mr. Beckham, are you always so calm? Have you never felt the urge to respond when people look down on you?" David was silent for a beat, his mind traveling back. "When I was a boy, during a match, a rival coach pointed at me and said, 'Look at that skinny kid. He'll never make it.' I was hurt. I wanted to argue to prove him wrong right then and there. But my father told me, 'Don't argue. Answer with your game.'" A smile played at David's lips, the memory lighting his face. "That day, I scored twice, and I learned something I've never forgotten. People remember what you do, not what you say in the heat of the moment." Evelyn sat quietly, absorbing his words, the depth of their truth humbling her further. "You've taught me more in this short time than I've learned in years." She hesitated, then gathered her courage. "Mr. Beckham, when we land, may I ask for a photo with you, not to boast? Just so I can remember this moment and the lesson it's given me." David chuckled softly, his smile warmer than the cabin lights. "I'd be happy to, but on one condition." "What condition, sir?" "Promise me that from today, you'll look at people with your heart first. Then your eyes." Evelyn nodded without hesitation, tears shining in her eyes. "I promise, with all my heart." The remaining hours of the flight passed in an unexpected peace. Evelyn listened as David shared simple stories of childhood days in Leytonstone, of rainy training sessions, of the quiet pride of wearing his country's colors. Each tale felt like a gift, a reminder of what truly mattered. As the plane began its descent, dawn's soft light spilled through the windows, casting the cabin in a gentle glow. Evelyn straightened her jacket, not to impress, but to mark the significance of the moment. She turned to David, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you. Tonight, I've learned more than all the years of living in comfort ever taught me." David smiled, his gaze kind and steady. "It wasn't me who taught you, your heart did. I was just here beside you." At the gate, amid the quiet shuffle of passengers disembarking, Evelyn and David stood side by side for a photo. But in that instant, she no longer felt like the wealthy woman she always thought herself to be. She felt like someone who had rediscovered a piece of her soul. David shook her hand one last time, his words sincere. "You're richer now than anyone else here." Evelyn smiled back, a smile of peace. the truest smile she had worn in years. All thanks to you.